Welcome to Everything Cancer, the empowering podcast for the cancer journey. I am Jill, your host, a longtime certified oncology nurse, cancer support group facilitator, and person striving to get the word out there about the proven power of effective self-advocacy on the cancer journey. This podcast is designed for those on the journey, those who love them, and also for providers to offer them a fresh and enlightening perspective. We have an engaging and warm spectrum of guests, from survivors to providers, both very inspiring, and cancer support organizations that offer amazing services, and to hear about managing symptoms and gaining a higher quality of life. We've got it all. We'll be discussing rekindling the intimacy after cancer changed your world. We'll break down practicing self-advocacy into easy-to-do, bite-sized pieces. We'll talk about everything cancer. The Everything Cancer podcast is not intended as a substitute for medical advice. Please consult with your healthcare team about any concerns you may have. The Everything Cancer podcast staff will not be answering any health concern questions. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Everything Cancer, the extra large suitcase of the cancer journey. I am so thrilled to welcome Erin Sullivan Wagner here. She has an incredible story to share. Erin has just amazing things to say from a survivor perspective, support organization perspective, and provider education. Erin is the executive director of the not-for-profit After Cancer Solutions for Sexual Health. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you.
It's great to have you here. I so appreciate what we work on together with education in sexual health solutions for people in the cancer journey. So, Erin, can you tell us about your story?
Sure. It feels like, okay, how much time do we have?
Just run with it. You have a great story to share.
I was diagnosed with anal cancer. It was 100 years ago. It feels like it was 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no symptoms of cancer. For people that are like so shock and awe of having a diagnosis, that's exactly what it was for me too. I had had a little bit of blood with the bowel movement and hadn't had a history of hemorrhoids. And so had it checked out, which most people just wouldn't have that checked out. I just happened to have it checked out, partly because I had a routine physical coming up. And that is when they did a colonoscopy and the cancer was diagnosed. But there was some confusion around the cancer diagnosis. So at first I was told that it is cancer, it has some GYN components to it. We need you to come back and have more tests. So for a short time, we didn't know the kind of cancer and we didn't know how advanced it was. So that's a horrible feeling in terms of, the shock and awe of realizing how mortal we are.
Yes.
When you sit back and think about it, we're all going to die sometime, but for some reason being told that yours might be sooner than you thought, it's just a lot to, I think even just absorb and compartmentalize and move forward with it. It's a bit caused me to feel a bit frozen.
Sure.
Anyway, with the diagnosis then, after being pretty scared about the advanced cancer, I was told that I don't have advanced cancer. Actually, I have just anal cancer. And
anal cancer.
Just anal cancer,
Okay.
which there's so much in that.
Yes.
In that phrase, because I was like, just anal cancer. What's anal cancer?
Right.
I've never used that word. We don't use that word.
Right.
So, what is that? And when I was told I had anal cancer, I was told, you have anal cancer, and I only have in the past seen this in gay men, and now I see it in women your age. Which was an odd thing for a surgeon to say.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, because I didn't understand what anal cancer was anyway. I had never heard of it. So to equate it with something that she was so familiar with in gay men, I immediately went to, so this has to do with that time, that part that ex. Oh, oh, I am going to have to talk to my mother about this, aren't I? Just immediately the
Yeah.
shame almost of, wow, does this have to do with that exploration into anal sex that time that my husband and I tried? I mean, the could not focus on the diagnosis because I was lost in thought of how am I going to talk to my mother about
Hmm.
this, and why couldn't I have a sexy cancer like breast cancer? Why this? How are we going to talk about this?
Hmm.
And quickly got comfortable talking about this because there's no avoiding it. When you have cancer, people right away ask, is it breast cancer? And so would have to say, no, it's anal cancer. And if you want to quiet a room, say that.
I'm sure. I'm
People don't know
sure.
what to ask. Like, so
Right.
what? So
Right.
what happens with that, Erin? How'd you get that? And it really is an HPV cancer, and it's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. Is
Right.
that it's an HPV cancer that had a whole lot of GYN components to it because it's like cervical cancer. And if we had been doing Pap smears in the anal canal all of our lives, we would have caught this, just like we do
S-
Pap smears in the vaginal canal.
Right. And I think that's a really important point to bring up is that um, first, it's not really part of the conversation as to what your sexual practices are. It's more
Right.
you have cancer that needs to be treated.
Right.
And also, and so I hope the conversations now are moving more towards that. I get the impression they are, but don't know all the time. Also, you had mentioned to me you had cervical dysplasia at one point, correct?
Yes.
Which makes
Yes.
you a higher risk for
Yes.
anal cancer. And women need to be
Yes.
aware, anybody with a cervix
Right.
needs to be aware of that. And that's why pap smears are so important. One of the reasons why, as well as cervical cancer, and which is awful in of itself. Um, so I like the story you shared with me about the stigma conversation you had with your family.
Yeah. So, I want to say one thing though, quickly, Jill,
Oh,
um,
please, please.
about what else can be done differently. So not only that it's important to get pap smears, it's really important for women to tell their gynecologist that they need a rectal exam
Yes.
because a
Thank you.
rectal exam will catch a growing tumor
Hmm.
long before a patient will go in because of complaint of
Yes.
symptoms. Oftentimes, anal cancer patients aren't actually going in until they're in stage 2 or 3.
Right.
And no reason for it. If you're getting a rectal exam, you're going to feel that tumor.
Right. That is important, especially with how prevalent HPV is now. That is
Absolutely.
really important. And I know surgeons who say, I don't understand why the rectal exams aren't occurring. Nobody enjoys them, nobody looks forward to them, but they can be life saving. And to inform our listeners, stage 2 means it's moved to more invasive,
Mm-hmm.
and stage 2 and 3 really talk about the lymph nodes and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
so it means it's spreading beyond a small tumor that is just on the surface. And so getting that diagnosis sooner truly can be life saving.
It can make a difference in the treatment
Yes.
too. So you
Yes.
may not have to have surgery. So I didn't have to have
Mm-hmm.
surgery because I
Mm-hmm.
really was stage 1. So I went into this thinking I've got cancer with a small c. I really did
Right.
feel that way because for 48 hours it was possibly advanced cancer. And so,
Mm-hmm.
nothing scarier than that.
Right.
First, the
Right.
diagnosis is devastating and shock and awe, and then advanced cancer. So to come back off of that 48 hours later with you've only got anal cancer, it was high fiving and woohoo, we're gonna be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Except that I'm gonna have to talk about
Right.
it. Except that we're gonna start using the word anal in our house
Right.
daily.
Right. Yes. And so, how did your kids react to this?
First, of course, mom has cancer. And so scary, scary, scary. My kids
Right.
were young. They were in, middle school and just getting into high school. And so there's nothing scarier than that.
Mm-hmm.
And friends ask questions and teachers ask questions and, assuming that that your kids can talk about the cancer that their mom
Mm-hmm.
has. And my kids had a hard time with it because not only had I not used the word anal a lot, they never used it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did ask if they could call it something else so that they could talk about it with their teachers and their friends, if they could, call it colorectal cancer. And I really did consider letting them call it something else just for their own comfort. And decided against that
Mm-hmm.
this is cancer. It's a part of your body. It's not so easy to talk about, but that doesn't mean we need to change the diagnosis. We got to get comfortable at some point just talking about who we are,
Right.
and that's a part of our body.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't let him call. In fact, kind of kiddingly, I did think about it and finally called him into my bedroom and said, I know you guys want to call it something else, and I appreciate it so much. There is one other name. You can call it anal cancer or you can call it asshole cancer. So you have that choice. And they, of course, said, Mom, you don't get it. We can't say that. And of course, they couldn't say that. But
Right.
anyway, they got more comfortable with anal cancer. They weren't saying the word asshole cancer.
Do they say it comfortably now?
They do. Not
Good.
with a badge of honor, but almost, kind of
Yeah.
with this is something that is a little bit unique, and
Right.
it is, they learned a lot from it all too. They watched me
Right.
learn a lot. And
I'm so glad it's moved to that point, and that they're and I hope that they are advocates now for early
very
screening.
much.
Okay, good, good. So what led to you developing All of Me Iowa and then After Cancer?
So I went through my diagnosis and treatment and really felt like I sailed through it pretty
Mm-hmm.
well. And afterwards thought I'm going to give back to cancer patients, and I'm going to help them with the emotional challenges that the journey is. And
Mm-hmm.
so went into life coaching. So got training for that and started coaching patients, and just was so curious about the sexual health piece of it. And the reason I was is because I was told 6 weeks after my treatment that my husband and I could go back to just having regular sexual relations and intercourse. So penetrative sex was a real go-to for us. It was is what was most common in our sexual behavior, and it was not possible. So the pain around having penetrative sex was so great. In fact, we weren't really having it. I felt like he was hitting a wall. He felt like he wasn't even penetrating. And the pain was so great that it always ended up in tears or blood or
Oh,
grimacing or all the things that would not make it a very erotic
right.
experience for anybody. And so we of course were concerned at first. What's wrong? I'm hurting you. How am I hurt? Why am I hurting you? And went back, and they really didn't. I was met with, wow, we've just never really seen this.
Mm-hmm.
um, we will get you a referral to your radiation. And then radiation referred me to a gynecologist, and the gynecologist referred me to did did treat, but referred me then to a pelvic floor therapist. But in that time, that 6 months that went on between my treatment, the end of my treatment, and being treated was too long. So the
Yeah.
scarring that had built up around the hymenal ring was so thick that it was unable to be reversed. We tried treatments for years, and we were never able again to have penetrative sex. And that seemed so wrong to me,
Yeah.
that something that could have been prevented by setting an expectation of what would be needed. I was new to cancer, but my providers weren't. They had treated anal cancer
Right.
patients before, and
Right.
they had treated patients who had pelvic radiation before, which was really more the point. So the fact that they didn't think it would be an issue, that they didn't know it could be an
Mm-hmm.
issue, told me that they weren't talking about it. They weren't asking their patients. Their
Right.
patients weren't telling them what they were going through. What a miss. What an unmet need.
Right.
So I kind of pivoted with my coaching of patients because I was so curious about, is this something normal? Is this Am I unique? Or is this something everybody goes through when they've had cancer? And I was shocked at how many patients, not always the same way I had, not always not able to have penetrative sex. Sometimes it was just painful and I
Right.
had to work through treatments and always somewhat painful. Sometimes it was just communication issues with their
Mm-hmm.
partner. Sometimes it was just people not feeling as attractive or themselves didn't feel like a sexual being. It's difficult when people lose a breast or lose their hair or lose a limb or have an ostomy. I mean, there's so many reasons that were impacted by all of this that I really felt like that's where people needed help.
Mm-hmm.
So I started coaching like that and then decided in 2013 that I could do more good
Mm-hmm.
if we were trying to change this.
Right.
If we were helping providers figure out how they need to talk about this. So I started collaborating with clinicians, and I mean the clinicians would be the gynecologists, the urologists, the people who were treating these
Right.
patients, primary care, um, after the diagnosis. They were going back to their lives and having these sexual health challenges. So I started working with them, the sexual health experts, on what are the issues? What are the interventions? What
Mm-hmm.
has worked for
Mm-hmm.
patients? And decided to be a voice back to the oncology community, raising awareness. Just this is something your patients need to know. Give them a chance to be able to go
Right.
back to their lives.
Right.
And in doing that, we applied for grants through the
Mm-hmm.
Iowa Cancer Consortium. And for a 5-year period, we were given grants to develop education for providers on how to address sexual health in a cancer care setting, so in a
Mm-hmm.
clinical setting. And eventually it became a nonprofit organization.
Thank you for all the work you've done, Erin, and how you have advanced knowledge in this really important realm for quality of life. It's amazing what you have done. It really
Thank
is.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And your voice is needed. The education is needed. Um, I know that when I initially worked on developing standards of care for a cancer center for sexual intimacy and fertility preservation, that women were not routinely being given vaginal dilators after
I
um,
wasn't.
right after radiation therapy to the pelvic area. And it's not that anybody intended or meant for anything to go wrong. I just think it wasn't considered part of the cancer treatment. Um, and again, people weren't bringing it up and saying, this is what I have happening. Now, through our standards of care, that is happening. And I think it is happening much more frequently in cancer treatment centers.
I know because I'm a patient and because I represent patients, and my voice is always representing
Right.
patients. But I used to hear this from oncology providers. And first of all, I want to say when we developed workshops for providers around the state, I was really in awe of the care that
Mm-hmm.
providers want to give, that care
Yes.
teams want to give
Yes.
and do give.
Yes.
So I really want to do a shout out about that
Right.
people really do want to do it right.
They do.
But I am also shocked that people expect patients to bring this topic up when they are unable to bring it up to patients, knowing what patients are going to have happen. Patients don't necessarily have a voice to even know. When I was a
Mm-hmm.
patient, and what I hear from other patients is we want our providers to guide us on what to care about, what to think
Mm-hmm.
about, what we need to do,
Mm-hmm.
what we need to not do. If my provider didn't bring up that sexual health is an issue and here's what you need to do about it, I didn't think about it. It must not be important. They'll
Mm-hmm.
tell me what's important.
Right.
It's a vulnerable time in our lives. So we're watching, we're listening, we're being the perfect patient, we're looking for guidance. We're not the ones saying, hey, I know I've got cancer, but I am really worried about having sex afterwards. What is going to happen there? That's not where we are as
No,
patients.
you're right.
We aren't even, we can't, that's not even on our
Right.
list.
Right.
So it's when I hear providers say, I think my patients would tell me, I just beg to differ. They're not in a
Right.
place to have the voice to tell you.
You're right. Um, First, one of the first points you brought up is that you were faced with your mortality when you were
That's
first
right.
diagnosed. And so that is foremost on your mind. And then also getting through the treatments is on your mind.
That's right.
And you are expecting your provider to guide you and to address issues with you that can greatly affect your life. Um, so, and providers do want to talk about this, but I think oftentimes, as we've seen in several articles that have been written, they are also uncomfortable bringing it up. As a person, they're uncomfortable bringing it up. So normalizing the conversation is so important. And
You know,
that is
Jill, oh,
happening.
sorry,
Go
didn't mean to
ahead.
talk
No,
over.
no, no, that's
I
okay.
was just going to
That,
say that was exactly what we found at the beginning of the project. We did focus groups around the state to
yeah.
understand kind of what are the barriers to care. Why isn't this talked about? And actually, there were some really good reasons why it doesn't get discussed on the
Mm-hmm.
provider side of things. Most, probably number one is there is this thought of, if I get into this conversation, this is going to take a while, and I don't have the time.
Right.
Nobody's got extra time in the clinic. But there were like 12 reasons that this
Yes.
doesn't get brought up. And of course, being uncomfortable with the topic, not knowing what to say, not having the answers, not knowing who to refer a
Mm-hmm.
patient to. Sometimes a patient is with their 5-year old child. You know, all of these things stop
Right.
providers from feeling comfortable
Right.
bringing the topic up. So that is what we focused on, is education that addressed all of those barriers. Is
Right.
there a way to tell patients, to give patients the information they need to know and not have it take more
Mm-hmm.
time? And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we did with a 6 point 30-second message, and that's why we did it that way.
I love the 30-second message. Could you go into that a little bit more?
Sure. So there's, in these workshops that we did, we learned a whole lot from the providers, not only about the barriers, but what they were able to, what they knew patients
Mm-hmm.
needed to know. And then we just expounded on that. So the 30-second message really has 6 points to it, and it lets the patient know after the diagnosis. And by the way, guidance, national guidance says this is what we're supposed to be doing, is speaking about sexual health after the diagnosis. But it's letting patients know that issues are common and expected. So you may have sexual health side effects that are
Mm-hmm.
common and expected. Doesn't mean they have to be severe, but they're common and expected. We believe they're a quality of life issue. So in saying it's a quality of life issue, you're letting the patients know that we think it's important. So it's
Right.
okay that you think it's important, because we do too.
Right.
And
Right.
this is a healthcare issue. We want you to bring those issues to us.
Mm-hmm.
We have resources to help. And though you may not care about it right now, in the wake of a diagnosis, probably not on your list of important things to do, even though you don't care about it right now, we know that addressing issues sooner versus later makes a difference on the
Mm-hmm.
outcome. You
Right.
respond better sooner versus later.
Right.
All of that can be said in about 20 seconds once you say it
Mm-hmm.
enough, but it's a 30-second message, because we don't have extra time in the clinic, but we do have 30 seconds. Everyone
Right.
would say, I've got 30 seconds for this
Right.
patient. And then we developed some resources around it too, a brochure for the patient, some
Yes.
communication aids for the providers. And then,
Yes.
as you know, you helped me build some patient educational materials, because that helps the provider so much in being
Mm-hmm.
able to address this. Sometimes that provider will use one of your patient education handouts, not just as a handout, but as a way to communicate with the patient, give that to the patient, and then say something about it. But most important for the care teams was that you can let patients know what they need to know, set
Mm-hmm.
expectations, and
Mm-hmm.
you can do it in 30 seconds.
Then it's a much easier topic to broach after, and to ask, how is this going, how are you feeling, are you having issues with sexual health, are you having issues with vaginal stenosis or erectile dysfunction.
Absolutely. It's an
That yes.
easier topic, and it's also normalizing for the patient. So the patient
Yes.
then may think, if nothing else, I know Jill cares. I'm going to
Right.
bring this. I'm going to ask Jill. I really don't
Right.
want to ask my oncologist. I'm going to ask Jill because I know it's something she cares about.
Right. And one of the things that we've talked about in the patient education is journaling, people journaling what is happening with them so that they have really specific notes to go and look at when they're visiting with their providers. It gives them real data to share instead. And also they can include their experiences in their questions for their providers.
For sure.
So,
You know what, Jill?
right.
I'm only going to stop. I want to stop you there, because that is so important.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I remember and I hear from patients is that providers want details. So what were you feeling? When did that how long after? Was it every time? Did you give yourself 45 minutes before you? Journaling through a challenge like that gives you intimate detail
Mm-hmm.
about not only what you were feeling, but what the timing of everything was. And it's so helpful
Yes.
for a provider to know that. So, good point.
Yes. Right. And you have a checklist of assessments for patients also that they can be handed with the initial conversation, correct information. Um, And I thought a really good coping mechanism that you had to help patients feel more comfortable in bringing these topics up is take a minute to either glance down at their journaled notes or glance down at the after cancer information that's been given to them. And they can gather their thoughts and gather their courage and then look back up at the provider or even just relay what is happening while they're still looking down if they're having a hard time maintaining eye contact. But the communication piece is so important.
Yeah, and giving patients words and empowering words maybe,
Yes.
but words that will be pretty vanilla, nothing
Uh-huh.
too strong like the word sex. So,
Right.
how is this going to affect my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with my husband? Is there anything I should say or tell my partner about this, how this will affect our intimacy? Those are all ways that your provider knows what you're saying. How is
Mm-hmm.
this impacting my sexual health? What are the
Right.
side effects? What do I need to care about, worry about now versus later? What can be done?
Hmm.
Eventually, I think we might get to a place where we actually try to preserve sexual health in the
Yes.
types of treatments that we do. We're not there yet. It's all, dealing with after your treatment, dealing with what side effects actually cause damage. But I think eventually we'll get there.
Yes, I agree. I see a lot of advances from uh, so much attention is being paid to survivorship issues now. And
Thank
they're
God.
right. And if you look at radiation therapy and how targeted it's becoming to
Yes.
help avoid collateral damage, that
Yes.
is a reachable goal. I think we'll get there. Um,
Yes.
so one of the things that I learned about through you, Erin, that I think is so valuable in rekindling and redefining intimacy, rewriting the sexual script is sensate focus.
Mhm.
I think it's a really valuable tool. If you could go into that a bit, if you don't mind.
You know, first of all, just about sexual scripts, because I think people
Yes.
are kind of, like, what are you talking about? Um, but a sexual script, we all have them. So
Right.
it's really um, it's the sequence, the launch sequence
Mm-hmm.
into moving from a non-sexual situation to a sexual one. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the touch, it's the lingering kiss, it's the behaviors that you do routinely do maybe before you launch into having whatever sexual play you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have. So if you think about what are your sexual scripts and what did cancer do to interrupt them? So, was it something you would meet your partner at noon and have a nooner? Um, Cancer really interrupts spontaneity. It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult to be spontaneous. Oftentimes, you're taking pain medicine
Mm-hmm.
to deal with maybe the pain with intercourse or whatever it is. Um, but when you take spontaneity out, for a lot of people that changes. You need to flip that script. You
Mm-hmm.
can't count on
Right.
anything. You're not going to have spontaneous sex in the park or
Right.
or whatever it is. You're not going to. And so to think about what are our sexual scripts, and
Mm-hmm.
unless you consciously think about what they are, you really don't even think about it. They're involuntary. They're things that you've used and are routines in your relationship with your partner. Cancer, because it does interrupt all of that, you really have to rewrite them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look back and say, can we still do the same thing? Can can I still dance with him in the kitchen and have that kiss become lingering and then immediately hop on the counter and have sex there?
Mm-hmm.
Is the answer. No, can't do it. So what could we do? How could I rewrite what still works the same way
Mm-hmm.
and what doesn't? And there's so much with sexual scripts. I think it's a big topic.
Yes.
But what you brought up is the sensate focus. And what's so great about sensate focus is it's a touching exercise, but it's a way to reconnect with a partner where touching is really, that's the furthest you're going to go. You're not going to orgasm. There's no expectation that this is supposed to end with we're both spent. It's an emotional exercise that reconnects you to a partner or someone you want to be intimate with. It's really quite amazing
Yes.
that it works, because it does.
Yes,
And
it does.
it really is just getting to know, touch and feel and pressure and saying, I like that, or softer, and cancer, it really can do a lot to change the sensitivity of your skin, whether it be because of neuropathy. Think about how we use our touch in sexual play. Neuropathy really can change that. But one thing I noticed for me is not only were we not able to have penetrative sex, but that my skin from the radiation burns had changed. The sensitivity had changed. What used to be stimulating to me when he touched me, like in the vulval area, what used to be stimulating hurt. It hurt. So quickly to move somebody's hand, or those movements were signals to him, but they were unknown signals. And that wasn't erotic. It was, I'm doing it wrong. I don't know what to do. Sensate focus gives you a chance to kind of rediscover what feels good and what feels good to your partner. I love everything about that for people, not even just after cancer, but just for couples.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes. And so for our listeners, there's lots of information online about sensate focus. And all you have to do is type in sensate focus, SENSATE focus, FOUFOCUS. Thank you. I'm trying not to look at my screen. I'm trying to keep my eyes on you. But sensate focus it's very easy to find. If you work with a sexual therapist, they can walk you through it, but there's a lot of really good information, and it is a low risk activity to be involved in, and it's not involving, as Erin explained, anything penetrative. And so you're not going to hurt anything by engaging in it. As Erin said, you're going to reconnect, and that's so important. So Erin, I have really enjoyed working with you. I think so much of what you've talked about, it's a very large topic and has so many facets to it. What have you discovered? This is a big question, probably maybe a couple minutes for thought. What have you discovered that has surprised you the most regarding the intersection of sexual health, survivorship, and cancer care?
I guess it has, I would say a couple of things. I feel so passionate about this topic.
Yes.
But at the same time, I really think that providers out there, and when I say providers, I mean care teams. So I mean the nurses, navigators, social workers, all the people on that patient care team, including the advanced practice providers and physicians. I really think that they want to do right by their patient.
Yes, they do.
And that sexual health, sadly, is not something they were ever formally given education on in terms of how to address it. I think people want to, and they want to know how to. So I'm surprised that it's difficult. I'm surprised that that isn't easier for all of us, since it is activity of daily living. It's a quality of life piece. I'm surprised that that takes education, and at the same time, I'm so glad that people are open to the education.
Yes.
Because you're only helping your patients by telling them what they need to know ahead of this, just to set some expectation that there are sexual health side effects that come from treatment, but there are also resources to help.
Yes, there are. There are. I think part of, and this is brought up so often, we're playing catch up right now in the cancer care continuum, because oncology care has advanced that we have survivors now. And thankfully, that is what's happened. And that's through the devotion of our care teams who have really participated in the clinical trials, have really worked with their patients to make sure that they have longevity and survivorship. But now we're playing catch up with all the things that happen in survivorship that we weren't aware of years ago. And so it isn't anybody's negligence or fault. It's that these are now becoming realized issues, and they are being addressed. And I'm so thankful for your voice to be part of addressing this and your resources.
I appreciate that, Jill, because I'm very well aware that sexual health is not the most important thing
Mm-hmm.
in cancer care or cancer recovery. I'm well aware of it. It doesn't mean that it's not important, though.
Correct. That's so true. That's so true. And that's why you have After Cancer Solutions for Sexual Health. That's why you have devoted so much time into it, so much effort. That's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it. It is a huge piece of quality of life. And even if someone isn't in a relationship when they are done with their treatment, doesn't mean they're not going to be in the future. And they need to take care of themselves in a way that hopefully will help and have conversations with their providers. One of the things I really enjoyed working with you on was intimacy with colostomy. That's a very intimidating prospect for people that are being informed that they are going to need a colostomy or nephrostomy, tracheostomy, ileostomy, any type of ostomy. It is a prospect that halts you right where you're standing. Your thoughts screech to a halt, and many people become overwhelmed. There's a lot of great resources out there for it. The ostomy.org, which is United Ostomy Associations of America, are just amazing. But go ahead, Erin, please.
With things like
Yes.
ostomy, which is one of the big fears for anybody to
Mm-hmm.
think, oh, how are we ever going to have sex again with an ostomy? As a patient, I would have felt the same way. One thing I think providers can do for their patients, and I wish everyone could
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to do this quickly, but it is to have prehabilitation training
Mm-hmm.
where patients, when we had children, we had Lamaze, we had patient-centered care where we'd have educational sessions before you go through treatment, and you'd be with people about the same
Mm-hmm.
term, people that are going to have babies at the same time. I think that's what should happen with surgeries that could possibly end with
Mm-hmm.
an ostomy, even if it's a temporary or permanent. But
Mm-hmm.
if patients could, ahead of having the devastation of that, if they could ahead of time learn what's possible with that, what
Mm-hmm.
to expect with it, what can be done about it, some of the organizations that can help you with it, how to set some expectations about how to be intimate,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the resources that you could go to from a clothing perspective or anything to cover it,
Mm-hmm.
how to prepare
Mm-hmm.
for having intimacy with an
Mm-hmm.
ostomy. If you could go into surgery knowing there's a possibility of that, but knowing that there are resources and the help out there for
Mm-hmm.
you and your partner, you'd have a whole different
Right.
sense. It wouldn't be devastation. It
Right.
would take some of that anxiety away.
Right. I
It
agree.
seems like it would, not only for that though, but for all cancer patients. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we should look more at prehabilitation.
Yes, that's so prehabilitation is very important. And I actually read the story today of a survivor that impacted me deeply, head and neck cancer survivor, who, when he was told he would be going for major surgery, he started running every day to build up his strength. And that his doctor shared with him that his recovery was so much better because he had strength and uh, resilience after his surgery. And he really credits that a lot with how he bounced back. Prehabilitation on so many levels is important. And if you talk with your doctor about it, and even if you find out how to do it, you can meet with a physical therapist, occupational therapist once or twice and really be given a lot of exercises that will be relevant to you. I love your idea of educating people ahead of time. Ostomies are life-saving procedures, absolutely life-saving, whether they're temporary or permanent. They have a real a definitive part in effective cancer treatment so that you can hopefully live a long life. And they have potential to not, as you said, Erin, not be devastating, which I think is really important to drive home too. And you brought up something else that I have found to be incredibly important that is a resource that can help people so much, and that's pelvic floor physical therapy.
Oh my gosh. It just, when we titled that The Miracle of Pelvic Floor Therapy, it's because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And can't believe that I mean, pelvic floor therapy would be good for just anybody.
Anyone.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, just have
Right.
cancer. But,
Exactly.
think of all of the things all of the side effects you have from
Mm-hmm.
surgery, radiation, chemo, or hormone therapy, or even just the medications you're on because of all of those treatments. They all can have sexual health side effects to it.
Yes.
And oftentimes, I mean, we're talking about sexual health, so it's the pelvic region.
Right.
And pelvic floor therapy can help everybody.
It can.
They are my go-to. When I talk to cancer patients, I always say, have you been referred to a pelvic floor therapist? There are very few things that you can't gain. I mean, that you can't be better for being at a pelvic floor therapist.
Exactly. And pelvic floor therapy deals with all the muscles and the nerves that are in the pelvic floor, which is basically like a sling that goes across the bottom of your pelvis and supports your colon, supports your bladder, and is integrated with your sexual organs, and it really has a lot to do with erections and with vaginal health and pelvic pain and pelvic health. There's just so much that can be impacted, including urinary and stool continence, which could also affect sexual health, but
Absolutely
affect
does.
your body image as well and how you feel about yourself. And if you can get in front of that through working with a pelvic floor physical therapist, that's life-changing for people. And that's what I've heard over and over again is pelvic floor physical therapy changed my life. So I'm one of our future guests is going to be a pelvic floor physical therapist.
Great.
So yeah, I'm thrilled about that. So one of the other things that we've talked about a lot, and it seems simple, but oftentimes it isn't, are how important vaginal moisturizing and vaginal moisture is, and also using the right lubricants. And lubricant can make such a difference in a sexual relationship, sexual encounter, intimate encounter. And it's really important that people stay away from the irritants in lubricants because your skin can be much more sensitive, right, Erin, after treatment.
For sure, that's true. Your skin is more sensitive after treatment, so you do have to be real careful. I would definitely be making sure your provider is aware that you are looking into lubricants as to what to do and not do. And I think, Jill, you've written some of the patient handout information on this, and anecdotally, what we hear from patients about what works and doesn't work. And I know you're not trying to be an advertisement for anybody out there, but even in your research, you found that there are some very good options for patients where they thought cancer or no cancer, surgery, whatever happened, these lubricants are great.
Right. So you need to look for something that doesn't have parabens, glycerin, petroleum, propylene glycol, and I'll have a link to some education on this to this podcast. Scented or flavored or warming lubricants, absolutely stay away from those. So those and good lubricant can make an amazing difference for people. Natural oils, that's typically recommended for external use. Such as mutual masturbation for males or something or masturbation of a male. But the silicone lubricants, as long as they're not being used with silicone, and we'll probably have a podcast. Actually, I know we'll have a podcast on lubricants.
It's a
But
great idea.
yeah, but for silicone, stay away from using silicone intimate toys. But they can be used with other types of silicone can be used with other types of intimate toys. It lasts longer than water-based. Water-based can be used with the silicone intimate toys, and also doesn't dry out as easily. I mean, I'm sorry, water-based dries out quicker than silicone does. That's the advantage of silicone, is it doesn't get absorbed by the skin, so it doesn't dry out. But that can be altering too, for someone.
You know, this isn't what you're asking me, Jill, but I'm going to bring it up. I
Sure.
think that communication is
Yes.
going to be so important for partners on
Yes.
even on this lubrication topic. So when sexual health when sexual health is impacted by the side effects from cancer, there is a dynamic that goes on
Mm-hmm.
in your partnership that changes. And because it is dynamic, if you change one thing in your relationship, how you respond, it changes how the partner then responds. Communication is so important here because there are changes that you're going to feel not only emotionally and psychologically from cancer, but you're going to have changes regarding the sexual health
Mm-hmm.
side effects as well. If you aren't communicating about it, which is another reason why I think this prehabilitation is so important, is so
Mm-hmm.
that the medical community can tell you and your partner what's gonna happen, what you can expect,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things that can help this, because communication can break down that relationship faster than anything else, faster than any other side
Mm-hmm.
effect.
You are so right. And much of our writing, our patient education goes into with after cancer does go into communication between the couple, between the intimate partners. That's so important. And to be respectful in that communication, compassionate both, and to listen well. That
So,
listening is a
Jill, I
key
had a
component.
patient tell me that when she needed a lubricant, that her partner was a little taken aback, or um, thought it had to do with, you're not as attracted to me anymore, or I don't do it for you anymore, or you must need that, because that wasn't something they needed in the past. And
Mm-hmm.
it's again kind of along with those sexual scripts, rewriting them. But without good communication, which some people enter into cancer without great communication skills with the people they sleep with. I mean, that's definitely true. We don't necessarily talk about
Right.
sex with the people we sleep with. We talk about it with our girlfriends. We talk about it on a
Mm-hmm.
podcast. It's difficult to talk about with your partner,
Yes.
but all the more reason that ahead of treatment, ahead for our provider community, for our patient care teams to be giving patients kind of the awareness that communication is also a part of making this journey successful between you
Yes.
and your partner.
Very much so. Very much so. I appreciate so much you being as forthright as you are with your experience, because I think you are hitting, more than likely for our listeners, the heart of so many issues they're dealing with. And your forthrightness and your candor has to be making a difference. And thank you for that, Erin. That's huge. What's your future vision for after cancer?
You know, it is the mission. So the mission is
Mm-hmm.
that all patients impacted by cancer will be screened for sexual health side effects as part of their care. So it
Mm-hmm.
is just standard in their care,
Mm-hmm.
so that every patient doesn't have, in addition to the changes that cancer brings about in their life, have the sexual health piece be a negative.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just the screening, it's then acting upon the positives in the screening. And I think that's where a lot of places are stumbling, and they don't intend to. It's just the resources they have to be able to address those issues. And I think a lot of patients are referral fatigued, copay fatigued. And so if things can be started out with the simple solutions, if providers understand what to do from a simple perspective initially and a practical perspective, that can then be taken later into how successful was that, which goes to journaling, how much did this help you. That helps with your referral then too. If you do need to see a gynecologist, or if you do need to see a urologist, or go to pelvic floor physical therapy, if you're able to share, well, we tried this and this and this, and this was our result, that helps so much more with advance through that referral process and that treatment process and intervention process as well. So it's the screening, and then it's acting on the screening points too. And if you advocate for yourself, also, if you feel comfortable in advocating for yourself and saying, hey, I did say last time I was here that I'm having issues with vaginal dryness and pain during penetration. And I tried water-based lubricant and silicone, and it didn't really help. What else can we do? So that piece of self-advocacy is really important with this as well. You know?
For sure. And it's, just at the beginning we talked about it's tough for patients to have a voice.
Yes.
To always be able to be assertive in the wake of cancer treatment and facing their mortality and the fear around that. It's a lot to absorb and
right.
put in its proper place in your life.
Right.
And the reason I know sexual health, some people would say it's just sex, but it impacts every part of your life. If that is the connection you have with a partner, if you don't have what you did in the past and you aren't rewriting that script, then it can slowly erode every other piece of your relationship. And you can live with a person, you can share the same interests, you can raise your kids, you can sleep in the same bed, and it doesn't mean it's intimate.
Right. I think that's a great point to bring up, Erin. And a very important point is that it isn't just sex. It is how that partner, your mutual perception of each other and your mutual trust of each other. And that does play into all other aspects of your relationship. And so you shared the perfect example earlier when you talked about a person who was saying that when she expressed to her partner she needed lubricant, they took it back upon themselves. And then that would possibly make them or cause them to feel self-conscious in the relationship, which can lead into other facets of their personal relationship. And there's just a lot of domino effect with this. And so working together on it and communicating clearly with each other and respectfully and listening well can really help keep a couple, intimate partners, more working as a unit and as a team through these issues.
And if I could just say one more thing,
sure,
Jill, that we haven't touched on, and it's a whole different podcast with someone else, but it's really important for us to recognize that the partner of the patient goes through also a recovery.
Yes.
And they also are impacted by that cancer in a whole different way. And even though we go through those things alone as patients, our partners are also going through a healing process that deserves it being acknowledged and attention given to it. They are one half of that relationship. You're not going to be able to heal on your own. You might be able to heal anatomically, but together as a partnership, you won't without that other person also having their needs heard and met.
And counseling can be so important in that too.
So
absolutely.
I wish it was mandatory.
And there are resources for counseling. It seems very hard to find. Cancercare.org has oncology social workers that will assist with counseling. Your healthcare plan may actually have counselors that work for them, your healthcare insurance plan. Or they can get you referred to someone that can work with you. Your cancer center may have people that are devoted to this, but there's a lot of places to start looking. And especially if you go to cancercare.org, you can find some resources there if you don't have resources readily accessible around you. And that's virtual. So that means you can do the counseling, at least start from your own home.
And the questions you can ask your care team is, what's been successful for patients in the past?
That's a great question. That really is.
And a lot of times they do know those answers. They just didn't think to tell you. And so don't be afraid to bring that up to a social worker or a navigator. They're probably the best people.
No matter what situation you're in right now, there is hope and there is a path forward.
And very true.
Yes, it is true. Erin, is there anything else that you would really, really like to share that we haven't covered yet?
No, I think we've kind of we've gone full circle. No, but thank you for having me on. I think having these conversations, hopefully, it helps patients just feel a little more normal and a little more heard and maybe a little more understood.
Thank you for being here. I know you're a busy, busy person and your time means so much to me. And I made a note while you were talking. I'm actually going to reach out to a lubricant manufacturer and see if they can come on and talk with us about different lubricants and their purposes and really get into the nitty gritty with us, because it is and also vaginal moisturizers. It's an important topic. And
you're doing important work, Jill, and patients I know will appreciate that. They may not have a voice to say, I want to learn about lubricants. But from my experience, they'll appreciate a podcast on that.
I think it'll make a big difference. And Erin, thank you for your review of my book. I really appreciate it. And
your book, I just want to say one thing about your book.
Sure.
I haven't figured out yet how that can be intertwined into the work that After Cancer does with providers. But I will figure it out because I have referred to others to your book.
Oh, thank you.
In the last week, more times than I would have ever thought. More times than I would have ever thought that it was needed. Your book does a step-by-step of everything that a patient is going to have to think about. They don't know it when they first enter, but what's nice about it is it's a great reference guide. It's not only got great tips, but you have listed the areas where journaling, making lists, how they will be helpful down the road for them in terms of looking back. It's just a great A to Z, comprehensive. I don't need to worry. I've got this journal, this companion journal right here that's going to give me tips and ideas. So I know you didn't ask me to give an endorsement here on the show, and I'm only doing it because I really do think it is everything I wished I'd had.
Oh, that I wished you did have it, but thank you for that support and that faith. I believe in it because of the entire continuum of care that I've witnessed over my years, and I'm very passionate about it. I put my heart into it for a reason, but thank you. That's a great endorsement. So thank you.
Welcome.
Erin, thank you so much for your time. We'll have you back. We have so much to talk about, and I so appreciate your time. Erin Sullivan Wagner, Executive Director of After Cancer, cancer survivor, and just an amazing person who has made such a difference for people and will continue to make a difference. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Everything Cancer. If you would like to submit topics for future episodes, please email everythingcancerpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is everythingcancerpodcast@gmail.com. Everything Cancer Podcast also welcomes your feedback on the episodes. And if you would like to support the continuing content creation of Everything Cancer, please visit us at patreon.com/Everything Cancer. Patreon.com/Everything Cancer. Everything Cancer is not intended as a substitute for medical advice. Please consult with your healthcare team about any concerns you may have. The Everything Cancer podcast staff will not be answering any health questions. Thank you. And thank you for being here with us.